last week for spring break, we decided to rent an RV as a family. And, you have 8 kids. I grew up in a family with 8 kids. We only have 2. So I didn't think it'd be that big of a deal to just go drive across the country in a big RV. And we went 3,000 miles in that sucker and just hit all the church history sites from here
awesome.
all the way to Nauvoo and back again. I've never done that before.
That sounds incredible.
I would not advise doing it in an RV that you are personally driving, for one thing. That it's killer on your whole body. It's like running a marathon in a lot of ways.
Wow.
I did not expect that. But then the week before, I was recording a podcast with somebody, and for whatever reason, I was just having the worst day I'd had in years, just mentally and emotionally.
Yeah.
And this guy just happened to be an executive coach that I was interviewing. I have a lot of different kinds of people on my podcasts: entrepreneurs, founders, coaches, athletes, just people who are good at creating visions and then executing on them. And I just realized I need a coach. I need an executive coach. And so I don't know a whole lot of them. So I've been interviewing coaches, and that's not something I've ever done. I never thought I'd need a coach for myself. This is called the Vision with Execution Show. And I came up with that name because I read a quote by Thomas Edison. And he said, vision without execution is hallucination. So I just thought to myself, vision with execution is reality.
Yeah, totally. Makes sense.
Very basic, simple stuff. I'm sure I did not come up with this concept by any means, but I like to interview people who are good at creating visions and have good imaginations, and then they go and execute it into reality. Because I know a lot of people who are really good at imagining stuff, but they're terrible at executing on it. And then vice versa. I know a lot of people who couldn't create a unique thought to save their life, but they can execute things very well because they've got systems and processes that they follow. And so the combination of being able to create a vision and then execute it into reality, I think, is very unique. And everybody's got their own way of doing that. And that's why I wanted to have you on, because I know you've had a lot of experience in a lot of different things. And I know you're working on some things right now where you've got to have vision and you've got to execute on that vision to turn it into reality, because you're in charge of it. The buck stops with you, as they say.
Yep.
So real quick, I want to introduce you. Actually, I think I'd like you to introduce yourself in the way that you want to be known. So let's hear from Bubba Page. Introduction.
You got it. Well, first and foremost, I'm a dad to 8. I've got kids 5 to 15, 4 boys, 4 girls. I am able to, I just love being a dad. It's so good. Fatherhood is amazing. I've got what I believe a great relationship with my maker. So I have faith in God and in Jesus Christ. I'm not ashamed to say that. He's my rock. I'm an entrepreneur. I've built multiple companies, luckily been able to sell, but also have had a failure too, more than one. And so it's, learning from the successes and the failures as an entrepreneur has been an incredible journey as part of my life. And then I have loved becoming more of an investor over the last about 9 years, 9, 10, I guess. And investing in companies has been something that I've loved doing, because I get to not only participate with that company, but I can try and help them the best way I can, do my best to pick ones that I think are going to be winners, and be a good steward, hopefully a steward over the financial blessings that I've been giving, and spread it out to others, hopefully help them succeed. I feel like my mission that I've been given here on this earth is to bring people to Jesus. And some of the ways that I do that is through entrepreneurship and investing. And so if I have this mission of bringing people to Christ, and I can utilize my skills and talents that God's given me, I think there's, from entrepreneurship and investing standpoint, there's something that a lot of people will call self-reliance. And I want to help more people reach a place of self-reliance, so that they can have an abundant mindset and be able to, when you have an abundant mindset, you're here to help. And you're going to be courteous and kind. You're going to be friendly to your neighbors. You're going to do what God asks us to do, which is to love your neighbors and love Him, love others as you love yourself. So those kind of aspects are where I'm at, and I hope I can share through my story of my own life and experiences of ups and downs, of the trials and the challenges that I faced in my life, and how I've leaned on God to be my rock. That's the only way that I could make it through some of those rough challenges. But that's me in my little bio. You could say that's
Yeah, I'm going to
part of
keep
my life.
all of that in. There's zero editing going to go on with that. So I love it. I love how you mentioned God and Jesus Christ all within that very first intro. I try and bring up God and Jesus Christ in every episode. I do, because I also personally feel like my mission in life is to glorify them through service, and that's the vehicle through which I try and bring the God and Jesus Christ to more people, is serving them. And service is something that means a different thing to everybody. Everybody has their own definition of what service is. And I was lucky enough to just be a good friend to one of my neighbors. And last year I was able to baptize him into the church.
Wow.
And we're still good friends. And he calls me when he's feeling down or when he's feeling up. And so I love having experiences like that. I'm actually the ward mission leader in my ward right now, and I love working with missionaries. My son's going to have his interview to go on his mission this week.
Wow.
So he should be getting his call in the next 3 weeks or so. And it's just really reminding me about the time I got to spend on my mission in California. I was in Sacramento, and Arnold Schwarzenegger was the governor, and he was at the time a huge hero of mine, because I wanted to be a bodybuilder when I grew up. And my companion and I were in the Capitol building in Sacramento when Arnold was getting sworn in as governor. And It was a complete accident. We had no business being there. It was just a P day, and we just happened to be touring the Capitol building that day, and boom, there was Arnold Schwarzenegger in the flesh. And that was one of the most memorable experiences I had on my mission, outside of, the spiritual experiences I had. But people that motivate me and inspire me have always kind of been those people that came out of nowhere. Because that was Arnold Schwarzenegger. I don't know if you've ever watched any documentaries about him or movies that he's done. I mean, I'm sure we've all watched Terminator and some of those, more popular shows.
I haven't even watched that one.
Are you American?
Oh
my gosh.
Missed it.
Well, watch the non-rated R version, because it exists. But I've respected him ever since he was in his early 20s, winning the world championships of bodybuilding. He won 10 years in a row, starting in his early 20s. And then he was done after that. And he's like a Michael Jordan almost in a lot of ways. And I've watched documentaries about Michael Jordan, and just the people who are at the top of their game and whatever it is, they all have some of these same habits and traits. And one of those traits is having the ability to create extremely realistic visions or imaginations in their brain about what they want to accomplish. So Arnold, there was this one bodybuilder back in the early 60s that Arnold wanted to be like this guy. So he taped a picture of the guy on his wall and then cut out the guy's face, and Arnold put his own face on the guy's body. And he would imagine himself looking like that. He just had it on his wall. He would just visualize it until it became so real to him that he eventually became more advanced than that guy. And at the time, that was the top world champion bodybuilder of the world. And I think he played Tarzan in a couple of 1960s movies or something. But Arnold eventually overtook the guy in all ways that they measure physique and whatnot. And Jordan was very similar, but his tactic for creating visions was actually he would talk out loud during a game. And I don't know if you knew this or not, but people would call it trash talking. But all Jordan was doing was talking and saying out loud what he was about to go do. And he would just say, I'm going to shoot a three-pointer. And he would tell it to the guy who was guarding him. And he would just go drop a three or do whatever he needed to do. He would state it out loud. So there's power in our words and in our brains and our imaginations.
Yeah, for sure.
And I know you've experienced moments, if not a lot of moments, where you have this thought, and you know that you need to go do it and create it and get it done. So that's kind of what I wanted to pick your brain about today a little bit. We don't have a ton of time, but I'm sure, I'm just going to assume this, you've got visions for 2025, for your 2025 that you want to execute into reality. So I wanted to just give you time to just say, here's my goals, here's my visions, and then here's how I'm going to execute them into realities.
Yeah, I mean, I think I'll talk through the process of how I built these thoughts and how I'm going to put them into reality.
Yeah.
Because when you do I do believe having a vision is absolutely key. Setting up goals and mindsets of thinking through what you want. Stephen R. Covey talks about starting with the end in mind. So if you look out, 5 years from now, where do you want to be? Who do you want to be? Who do you want to be like? And starting with that end in mind allows you to work backwards to create a system and a structure to get there. So I'm a big believer of yearly planning. So you plan the year in advance and you put the biggest elements of your year on the calendar first. So like my kids' graduations or their baptisms or date nights with my kids or birthdays and vacations, church events, whatnot. I'm going to put those on my calendar as like the most important pieces. And then I can fill it in with, okay, well, I need my health taken care of. So I'm going to exercise. I'm going to do this on a daily basis, or I'm going to worship in the church or in the temple. And when am I going to do that? And how often am I going to do that? And so I plan out the year as best I can. Obviously, things come up. You have to have some level of flexibility. But when you plan out the year in advance, that gives you a vision of what that looks like. And you can see if you have certain goals that you want to accomplish, whether it's physically, mentally, spiritually, financially, you can set it up working backwards with the end in mind. You want to earn X dollars, you want to have this type of job, you want to build this type of company. Look at it and then work backwards of what it takes. I think it's a lot easier to visualize, when you say like, I want to earn $1 million, right? You'd be able to look backwards and say, okay, well, that means I have 52 weeks this year to do that. So in order to earn $1 million, I need to be producing about $80,000 a month. And maybe it won't start with 80. So I've got to have, if I start with 20, then the next month's got to be 25. And then I've got to, at some point, get up to 150 at the end of the year to make up for, you know what I mean? So starting with that end in mind. And then Sunday planning is critical. So there's a gospel principle that I love to bring up, which is the spiritual creation of things, which is like this vision, right? That turn into. Right. So according to, my belief, our beliefs, God created everything spiritually first before he created it physically. And what's fascinating about that is even ourselves, we were first created spiritually before we received a physical body. And if we incorporate that same gospel principle into our lives, where we conceptualize in spirit form what our lives will look like or become, and hopefully you're doing this with the guidance of his spirit, then those things can come to fruition. Now, his will always take place. And so if we don't plan it with his will in mind and trying our best to listen to his will, things may not go as we thought. I did not envision getting divorced. That was not in my future plan. That was not my vision. And so, there's certain things that God needs you to go through to help shape you to who he needs you to be. That one I would never wish on anyone. But that was a trial and a challenge that I guess I was meant to go through. I didn't realize that, nor was it in the plans. But going back to kind of this yearly planning, this weekly planning, and then daily planning, I think this is how you get to the nitty-gritty of accomplishing your goals. If you want to have a six-pack because you want to be physically fit, you're going to have to exercise, and you're going to have to do it frequently. You're probably going to have to change some of your diet and your habits of eating. So you would look at this year and say, okay, there are checkpoints that I need to see how I'm doing. And that means every week I probably need to be exercising X amount of times or eating this types of things this week. And then daily following through with, okay, today is the day I'm going to plan how I get my protein in. I'm going to take my creatine. I'm going to go to CrossFit. And I'm going to structure my life to set up that level of success. But anyway, so those are some of the high level things that I love to do. Create it spiritually first, writing it down, putting the most important things on there first, trying to allow God to guide your thoughts by creating it spiritually, and then looking at it annually, monthly, weekly, and then daily, where you take a moment of your time every single day to ensure that you're following through on those goals. Sometimes we get distracted by things that are going on in our lives or the world. And those distractions, most of the time, don't come from God if they're taking away from what's best. And so you look at the adversary who wants to take you off your path, especially from a spiritual standpoint, and he will throw every level of distraction or feeling of sadness or anger or loneliness or whatever it is in your way to distract you from what's most important. He'll numb you out, or he'll encourage you to numb yourself out by scrolling or by TV or by movies or by whatever is not as productive to get you off your path. And if he can, then he knows he wins, even if it's just little things. And we all get caught up on this stuff. I'm not immune to this either, especially when you're going through the hardest things of your life. You want to numb out sometimes. And if you don't face the reality of your life and try to overcome some of these challenges and hurdles, then you can be stuck for years in this numbing process, right? Think scrolling, think addictions, think alcohol, think, anything like that can take you off of your ultimate path, your divine destiny. God knows the reality of who we can become, and he's set us up in this life to become that. So it doesn't matter if you came from 8 kids or 1 kid, or if you had money or you didn't have money, or if you were born in a certain state or country or not. God has set you up to become the person you are meant to become, so long as you follow his plan and his path. And we all get distracted. We all get off path, but he's invited us to come back. And so if there's anybody listening who's felt off, like you're not on the path you were meant to be on, this is your sign. God is calling you to come back. He's calling you to come back and to get back on the right path. And if you can heed that prompting, that voice of inspiration, come back to him and ask in prayer what you need to do what do you need to repent of? And he'll tell you, if you ask sincerely and you ask, what do I need to fix? What do I need to repent of? Who do I need to apologize to? Who do I need to forgive? in order to get back on the path to where he can speak to you in the spirit, so you can feel that true revelation. And this revelation isn't just for spiritual things. He can reveal things to you that will help your kids, that will help your work, that will help you accomplish your physical goals, your emotional goals. I've felt really lucky that in the last couple of years, although I wouldn't have wished for divorce, that this experience has allowed me to look inward and to look inside myself and to take a healing path, with the help of therapists and books and retreats and coaches, to find the pieces of me that I needed healing, that I didn't even know I needed. It was like a blind spot that I didn't know. And I don't know if I would have gone through that if I didn't have to go through this hell of what divorce is. And it opened my eyes to seeing that there's wounds, that we all have these childhood wounds even that come from even the way we were raised. And it doesn't even mean that you have to have big T trauma, but even a little T traumas where you maybe didn't feel loved at some point, or maybe you felt left out, or you didn't feel seen or heard. And our minds internalize those things and create these wounds. And if we don't realize that we have these wounds, then we're going to be oblivious to why we're getting triggered. We all get triggered sometimes, and typically our spouses are the ones who help us get those triggers. But guess what? I believe wholeheartedly that it's part of God's plan that we marry someone who shows us some of our weaknesses, because he needs us to find those weaknesses and to make them strengths. And so when we do receive those triggers, whether you're in a relationship or not, it's a sign for you to realize you have something to work on. So let's say somebody says something at work and you get pissed off. You're like, what the heck? That was rude. I don't appreciate that. And maybe it triggers you to say something or to respond in a certain way. Next time when that happens, recognize that reaction that you just had maybe was because of something that happened when you were a kid. Maybe you didn't feel heard because you grew up with, you said you grew up with 7 or 8 kids, right?
Yep.
That you didn't feel heard. And so you're going to go in your adult life and you're going to demand attention because you had to demand it growing up. And so when you demand that attention, maybe it sets off people, or maybe you get triggered when you said something and somebody didn't hear you out. And so that is a sign of some internal healing that needs to take place. And there's a book called How to Do the Work. There's another book called How to Become the Love You Seek. And there's another one that I love called Attached. And then even another one called Secure Love. And for men out there, there's another one called The Masculine in Relationship. These are pieces of the pie that I would suggest reading and studying and focusing, looking inward, because you cannot change anyone but yourself. You cannot change your spouse. You cannot change your parents. You cannot change your friends. You can't even really change your kids. But if you change yourself, meaning you heal yourself, and through God's gift of Jesus's atonement, of his sacrifice, truly, deeply heal, then you will become a different person who responds differently when somebody may have triggered you in the past. You may be able to find a way that you find Christ-like love for that person. And you recognize that the only reason they're chewing you out is because they're hurting inside, that they're dealing with some kind of a trigger or a wound that they need to heal. And when you find that you have that charity, that true love of Christ, that empathy for them, you see the world in a completely different way. But the next time somebody cuts you off, instead of flipping them off or chewing them out or, yelling at whatever, you realize, you know what? Maybe they're dealing with something that's really hard for them. Maybe their son just committed suicide and they're completely oblivious to the world around them, right? Maybe they just realized that their spouse was unfaithful to them. And they're just out of their mind. They can't even think about what's going on outside. And they cut you off because they didn't even look, right? You have no idea what people are going through. And that's where I feel like when you do go through hell of some sort, and everyone has or will, it's only a matter of time if you haven't. recognize that everyone else is going through hard things. And when you can see the world through the vision, the lens that maybe a little bit more like God sees it, as he looks at us as these poor children, that he's sensitive to our hurts and to our wounds. And he knows that we're struggling. And even when we mess up and make stupid choices, he looks at us with those eyes of just like, oh, you poor kid. You know, you made that choice probably because you're hurting inside. And his arm is outstretched to bring you back into the fold, to bring you back to him. But we have to reach out. His arm is outstretched. It's reaching out to you, but it's up to us to reach back out to him. He can't do that work for us. He's already paid that price. But we have to be willing to utilize that atonement, that sacrifice, in order to use it. And if not, we may have to suffer as he suffered. And so I go on a little soapbox here, but that's a little something that I feel like I've been learning.
Well, the thing that I keep thinking back to of all the things that you just said was we all have these blind spots that are basically our weaknesses, that are the opportunities for us to turn them into strengths. And I know the scripture, Ether 27, that you're talking about, and that's one of my favorite scriptures. But I spent a lot of time myself thinking about the blind spots and weaknesses I have, and thinking that I can take care of them on my own. And what you just ended by saying is that God's hand is always outstretched, and the power of the atonement is available, but we have to move toward it ourselves. And one of the things I have learned is that outstretched hand is actually probably somebody in your life that can help you move closer to God and Jesus Christ. And we were talking about having a coach earlier. And that's what I've been feeling is I want to become my best self possible. And I know I can't do it by myself. Or at least it would take me an incredibly long time to do it by myself. And I'm interested in accelerating that process right now, which is why I'm searching for a coach. And I've been talking to a few coaches and interviewing them, and you've introduced me to one, Jeff Mask, just barely. And so needing help, I think that's step number one, is realizing that we all do need help, but not in a way that makes us weak or something. Knowing that you need help is actually the first step to becoming your best self possible. And I learned that big time when I went through addiction recovery myself. And I learned so much about my own weaknesses and how much I need help. But I feel like everybody should go through addiction recovery, because we've all got things that hold us back, that we go to numb out. And those are what I would call addictions. If you have to use it to feel normal, it's an addiction. Doesn't matter if it's pornography or drugs or alcohol. So,
or scrolling.
An addiction is not like this earth-shattering, life-ending thing. It's just information that tells you that's an area of your life that you're using as a crutch.
Yeah.
And instead of turning it into a major strength. So for me, pornography was my addiction. And now, 9 years later of sobriety, I can talk about it with a lot more empathy, and I can help other people through it. Whereas if I wouldn't have gone through that process, I never would have been able to have those kind of conversations with people. And I feel like that's one of my most important callings right now, is to invite people to reach out to me. I mentor people through addiction recovery right now, and I don't charge for it. And it's just, I put it out there as much as I can. Never would have had that opportunity if I hadn't realized that was a major blind spot in my life. So
I appreciate you being vulnerable, man, because it's helpful, especially for men, to talk about these vulnerabilities and know that we all have weaknesses, we all have wounds, and we're all trying to figure out life. And so if we can help one another grow and realize that, hey, you can do this, like you can overcome whatever that challenge is that you're facing, you can. and incorporate God and Jesus into that process. And there really can be some incredible healing. And I love, not just men, when all people look inward and see that there's places that they can do better. And not looking at it from a shameful standpoint, but it's like, I think God gives us guilt to know that we've done something wrong, to be able to fix it. And Satan uses shame to tell us that we are wrong. Not that the thing that we did was wrong, but that we are bad, evil. And it was actually just stated in conference, this exact thing, the difference between guilt and shame. I think guilt really is a godly gift to help us to know we can do better. But know that when you start to feel shame and want to hide, that's an area where you need to bring to light, because Satan wants you to put it into darkness. He wants you to feel like you're horrible and be miserable like unto himself, and bring it to light, and being able to be open and vulnerable and speak about it. That's a critical component of becoming more Christ-like and into our healing. So I'm proud of you, man. That's awesome.
Yeah. And the thing that I've learned the most through just being able to talk to so many people about my own addictions is that there's so much power in bringing those weaknesses to light and talking about them out loud with other people who might be struggling. There's just a tremendous amount of power that comes from doing that in all aspects of life. And I enjoy now just sharing those things about myself and being vulnerable, because it almost 99% of the time it invites everybody else to be as vulnerable back to me, and you get way deeper connections and way better friendships that way when you can just talk honestly and deeply and be vulnerable.
Vulnerability breeds connection.
Right.
Vulnerability is such a key to connection, and we don't realize it, especially in relationships. Vulnerability is the key that will breed connection.
And the interesting thing about that is that addiction is the opposite of connection. So it's this really interesting circular logic that we get caught up in, and it disconnects us from the world and from ourselves and from our family and friends and from God. But when we are able to move back the opposite direction and try and connect and move past those addictions and build our relationships, it does work it in a powerful circle the opposite way as well. And I don't even know if I made any sense right there, but it made sense in my mind. So
there you go, man.
Maybe I'll write a book about that one day.
I love it.
So I got to let you go, man.
Yep. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, I didn't expect the conversation to go this way, but it was intended to go this way for sure.
Absolutely. Well, if anybody wants to find me online, they can find me on Instagram at Bubba Page. If they're on LinkedIn, there's not too many Bubbas on there, so Bubba Page on LinkedIn. I love connecting with people and trying to share goodness out there. So thanks for having me, man. Appreciate it. It's so good to catch up.
Yeah, totally. It's been awesome, and I think this is probably the longest conversation we've ever had in our 20 plus years of knowing each other. So
that's probably true.
This was
at least without getting interrupted by like tons of people at events or something.
Yeah, because you're like the most popular guy in the room whenever we go somewhere.
Oh, whatever, dude, whatever. Hey, you know what? If anybody ever wanted to have a deeper discussion or talk, I do get too many requests just like from online. So BubbaPage.com, there's a place where people can schedule an appointment if they wanted.
Nice.
BubbaPage.com is a website that helps. But
cool, man. Well, this has been awesome. Thank you so much. I know you're in between just like a billion things, so thank you again. And this has been the Vision with Execution show. My name's Adam Torkildson. I just had Bubba Page on, and Bubba, I hope you have an awesome day and awesome week.
Hey, thank you, man. We'll talk to you soon.
Okay, bye-bye.